Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. And now that the season has turned, the calendar has flipped, we are well into December, and there's only a certain number of undefeated teams left, and one of those teams are the Wyoming Cowboys. We brought in Ryan Thorburn from the Casper Star-Tribune to talk a little bit about those Wyoming Cowboys, undefeated, and leading into that undefeated matchup with the Arizona Wildcats. Ryan, how's everything going?
Everything's great. In Laramie, it's finally have a cold front moving through. We've had unseasonably warm weather, so starting to feel like basketball season. It's certainly nice and warm, and things are cracking in the arena auditorium this year.
Perfect. Please give Ryan a follow over on Twitter at @by_Ryan Thorburn. That's THORBURN. And please follow all of his work over at the CS Tribune at CS Tribune. Ryan, what a starting line for the Cowboys. Your squad is one of the lone lossless teams left in the nation. They have a win over a Pac-12 team. They shut down one of the nation's leading scorers. And they garnered a tight road win at Grand Canyon. It can get a little wild in there. Ryan, can you share some of the elements contributing to the Cowboys' flawless start, including a number 12 ranking in the initial net release from the NCAA?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for starters, Wyoming has a sophomore forward named Graham Ike, who is going to be, a star in the Mountain West this season. He flashed a little bit last year. He only played in 12 games. He was under-recruited out of Aurora, which is a suburb of Denver, because he had an ACL in high school. So he was really a steal for Jeff Linder, Wyoming's second-year coach, who actually put together what was considered, the Mountain West top recruiting class in 2020, despite COVID and a lot of these guys not even visiting campus. And Graham is certainly, the centerpiece of that class, as it turns out, now that he's healthy and dominating. So far this year, he's averaging, 20.8 points, 9 rebounds, and if teams do not double him, it's an automatic deuce. So Graham Ike is where it all starts, inside, and then outside they have some really good shooters. Drake Jeffries recently set the Mountain West record with 11 threes in a game the other night against Hastings College, and then Xavier Ducelle, another member of that recruiting class, is a really good on-ball defender and a really good three-point shooter as well. And then kind of the straw that stirs the drink is a super senior named Hunter Maldonado, who is a 6'7" forward who is now actually playing the point guard position. He's a point forward. They lost the Mountain West Freshman of the Year from last year. Marcus Williams was their point guard last year. He transferred to Texas A&M. So Maldonado, Maldo as they call him, is one of those guys who is capable of putting together a triple-double. He's averaging 18.9, 5.7 rebounds, and 5.4 assists. So they really have a really good starting five, and they're off to a great start at 8-0.
I think we need to dive a little bit deeper into some of these, some of the players on the roster, like you mentioned here, Ryan. You mentioned Graham Ike. He dropped 35 earlier this season. He's a legit force. And then your article, trying to defend him, it termed it as similar to tackling Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter. So all of our fantasy football listeners out there know exactly what's that like. He owns one of the highest unit usage percentages in the entire nation, not within the Mountain West, but the entire nation. And he shoots it over 55% from the field. And he gets to the line a ton. So what else does the nation need to know about Graham Ike before this Arizona game and he gets on the national stage?
Well, yeah, the first thing they need to know, and it's the same mistake I made at first, and everyone does. It's pronounced EK.
EK.
It's spelled Ike, but it's EK. I think what people need to know about him is that he's very humble. But like, if you go to the arena at 6 a.m., the athletic directors mentioned he's heard basketballs dribbling. He's like, what in the heck's going on? And EK is in there. He's put in a lot of work to get stronger and obviously to heal up from his high school injury. He's only 6'9", and he's listed as a 6'9". I don't know that he doesn't appear to even be that tall. So he's a force inside. He's a classic post player with a lot of the old school post moves. So he's not like a modern day NBA post player. He's still developing and working on his 3-point shooting. He has knocked down, a few 3-pointers this year, but it's mostly they throw it in the post, and if he's single teamed, it's going up. If he's doubled, he's finding guys, and it all goes through him. Or Maldonado is basically going to the other side of the court with the ball and backing smaller guards down and getting in the paint. And so their two best players are getting it done mostly in the paint, and then as I mentioned, they led the Mountain West in threes last year and scoring last year. The real difference this year, besides everyone getting a year older, is that they're holding teams to 36% field goal percentage. This year, their defense is dramatically improved, so they can win in a variety of different ways, and that's what they've done so far.
You mentioned the defensive metrics and the defensive potency that they have. And if you're going to hold a team to, like you mentioned, that low percentage field goal wise, and you chase them off the 3-point line and yourself are going to get volume threes, that sounds like a successful equation, not only in the Mountain West, but also nationally. You mentioned Maldonado, like backing people down. He is absolutely fantastic. Just our type of player here on the podcast. And senior leadership is crucial during the season. And luckily, the Pokes roster has that with 6'7" Maldonado. You mentioned he's a threat for a triple-double anytime. Illustrate the uniqueness of your lead guard to the listeners so they can get to know one of the finest players, not only inside your conference, but also in the nation at the guard position, especially for a large lead guard.
Yeah, it's unique because, Wyoming had some very lean years with their previous coach who recruited Maldonado, a couple of 20-plus loss seasons in a row. He was playing the forward. He was, playing against bigger guys. So it's been an adjustment now with the ball in his hands at all times. The key to what he's doing this year that he's improved on is the pace of the game. So far, the opponents they've played, and they've played some pretty good opponents. They've played, on the road at Washington, on the road at Grand Canyon. He has not been sped up. They're playing at his pace, and when they do that, when he's backing guys down and kind of feeling things out, being patient, it's really remarkable. They're just not turning the ball over, hardly at all. They were at Cal State Fullerton the other night and had, very few turnovers. Same against McNeese State. Those are two teams that like to turn people over. Now that being said, they play Arizona on Wednesday night, and Arizona's turning people over at an incredible rate. And obviously, EK will be dealing with 6'11" and 7 foot instead of, some of the opponents they played inside. So, this is going to be the ultimate test. Maybe on their schedule, there's some Mountain West teams that are certainly in the hunt for the NCAA tournament. But Wednesday night, undefeated Wyoming at Arizona. Both teams have held up their end of the bargain. So that's going to be obviously the marquee non-conference game for Wyoming, and a great opportunity, win or even lose, to improve this really solid early non-conference resume they have right now.
No doubt. I mean, that has to be one of the games of the week if we're following along as college basketball fans. And again, like we mentioned before, there are so few undefeated teams. The fact that we're going to have two face each other, with your Cowboys facing the Wildcats, completely fascinating. Can't wait to get our eyes on that in some fashion or form. You mentioned Drake Jeffries earlier. He is just like a secret weapon for the Cowboys. He's got more size on the wing. He is absolutely an elite floor spacer with supreme ball security. You mentioned the low turnover number earlier. Ryan, is this elite three-point shooting sustainable for Jeffries? It seems like he's pulling like a Matt Hoover from Oakland a couple of years ago, where he just jacked threes and made them at a high percentage, even with a high volume. How special is he spacing the floor for the superstars that we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, he's an elite perimeter shooter. He was that way in junior college, and he was, really good last year. And this year he's taken it to another level. I don't see him hitting 11 threes in a game again in the Mountain West. But, the other thing about Drake that is something, this is my first year covering Wyoming. I was in Oregon the last 8 years, but
right.
Just looking back at last season, I'm really impressed with how Drake is rebounding the ball this year. He's, averaging over 6 rebounds a game, even though he's a perimeter player. And, he swoops in there and really helps crash the glass. So that's been another point of emphasis for Wyoming this year, is to be a better rebounding team. And, obviously EK is good. They have the only starter I haven't mentioned is Jeremiah Oden, another sophomore who is a really lean but athletic, bouncy guy, like 6'10" range, who's really feeding off the attention that EK is starting to get and putting up some numbers now. All 5 starters were in double figures, so it's going to be hard to beat these guys. Now, EK has been in foul trouble at Washington and at other times. I think that's, probably their Achilles heel would be getting him in foul trouble. And they don't really have much of a bench at this point, but they do have, a guy named Brendan Wenzel, who is a Utah transfer who seems to really be coming on as kind of that sixth man. They have a 6'10" kid, Hunter Thompson, who's from Wyoming, who has started, the first 4 years of his career. He's a super senior, who's now coming off the bench, and he's a 6'10" guy, but he's really a three-point shooter. So, he was kind of playing out of position in years past just because of his size at the 5. He's really now, when he's in there with EK, that's impossible to guard. You either try to guard EK down low, which is difficult, and if not, you cannot block Thompson's shot from the perimeter. So one more bench guy that they hope to have that really has starter talent down the road is Kenny Foster. This is 3rd year in the program, another Aurora kid. He's dealing with a high ankle sprain right now, and the way they're playing, they're not rushing him back. So they really feel good about at least 8 men in the rotation. But right now, it's mostly the starting 5 carrying the load.
Yeah, it seems that way. And then, we talked a little bit about Drake Jeffries, and one of the returning three-point shooters inside the conference is Xavier Ducelle. Can you expand a little bit more about Xavier, and then maybe talk about the length that Jeremiah Oden brings to that starting lineup? Because there's no easy pickings in this starting lineup. Everybody is 6'4" and above or longer. So there's no weak link as far as the defensive outlook looks on this. And it seems like they can switch on the perimeter. They can guard inside. So maybe expand upon the starting 5 a tiny bit here, Ryan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Xavier Ducelle, another sophomore. Remember that recruiting class that Linder brought in his first year. I think everyone kind of assumed he would be Wyoming's best player this year just based on his sample size from last year. Mm-hmm. When they went to the Mountain West tournament, they blew out San Jose State in the first round, and then in the quarterfinals, they against San Jose State they scored like 110 points or something like that, and then in that 24-hour period of adjustment, they completely changed their style of play against San Diego State in the 1-8 matchup, and went to a almost a 4 corners type situation where they were waiting until 5 seconds or less in the shot clock to shoot. And I believe the score was 63-61, something like that as a final. San Diego State held on, but I believe Ducelle had 24 or 25 of Wyoming's points. He was masterful in that game. So he's a really good player. He's kind of been quiet offensively as other guys have stepped it up. But you mentioned the elite score. They had Detroit Mercy in the opening game. Their star player, the coach's son, is averaging 26 points for his career, I think.
Yeah, Davis is a monster. Yeah.
Yeah, Ducelle really shut him down. I think he was in the teens, but he shot a lot of shots to get there and probably was worn down a little bit by the altitude. So Ducelle's a really good defender, a really good three-point shooter. And right now he's a little quiet on offense, but once West play starts, he'll be one of their guys.
You know what? The altitude element is definitely an underrated aspect of going on the road to play you guys. And then I guess we need to dive in deeper right now and take a look at the upcoming schedule for the Pokes. Wednesday is going to be season defining against, a top 15 Arizona team with its new coach, Tommy Lloyd. Then you have, UVU, who is fresh off of a BYU upset. And then you have another Pac-12 team in Stanford. This is a critical 3-game stretch for the team, right, Ryan? And what is the vibe rolling into this huge opportunity for your squad?
Yeah, I think they're going into the Arizona game feeling confident, but like playing with house money. Really, when you've the atmosphere at Grand Canyon is, Linder said it's the best he's seen beyond San Diego State or Gonzaga. Obviously he's a Western guy, so those are the venues he's been in that he compared Grand Canyon to. So they feel like that was a big one. They beat Oregon State last year in non-conference play. Of course, fans weren't allowed at Pac-12 games, and Oregon State ended up in the Elite Eight. But they felt really good to get that first one at Washington. Even though Washington's not a great Pac-12 team, they do have really good athletes and some really big players. So they feel like checking those boxes and getting those road wins. I think they're the only team in the top 25 of the net rankings that has 3 true road wins already. That's they already have those cards, in the deck, and anything they do against Arizona, if they were to upset Arizona, obviously that would open up the nation's eyes, and they'd be ranked and all this. But even if they just play well at Arizona, I think that's a good result, even if they lose. And then, if you are able to come back from that, and whether you win or lose, whether you're high or low, and beat Utah Valley at home, that would be another quality win. Utah Valley just beat BYU in overtime. They have a post player who's an NBA prospect that's been around a long time. That's going to be that EK matchup with him is going to be worth watching. I wouldn't be surprised if NBA scouts are watching that one. And then, neutral court game is something they haven't done yet. So they'll be out in Hawaii and they get Stanford. And, Wyoming fans, I don't know if you know their history, but from the old WAC days, they really loathe BYU, and BYU is in that tournament. I know they'd love to play BYU. So, if you could get Utah Valley at home, you get probably the computer jump from playing at Arizona, who's one of the best teams in the country. And then if you can get a neutral court win over a Power 5 team or an NCAA tournament projected team like BYU, you're in the mix. You're in the mix for the NCAA tournament. Now, the Mountain West is going to be a tough league this year, but non-conference-wise, you will have more than contributed to the league's success.
No doubt. And I love the breakdown there. I think you explained the opportunity perfectly there, Ryan. And that leads us, into the latter part of our conversation here, which is, inside your own conference, which has been really strong the last couple of seasons. And we've always tried to stay up late to watch those games. We've adored your conference from afar, and we alter our precious sleep patterns, for the Colorado State, for the San Diego State, for Nevada, even Boise State on occasion. We've stayed up late for, in past seasons for your greats like, Josh Adams, Larry Nance Jr., and we were lucky enough to even view the great Fennis Denbo. So can we now include Wyoming into the top of the conversation within your conference? And maybe what else has caught your eye thus far within the Mountain West, and maybe open up some of the listeners' eyes to the talent that's available there?
Yeah, it's very interesting because Wyoming was picked to finish tied for 8th in the Mountain West, which has 11 basketball teams. So outside of Jeff Linder's little circle, there wasn't a lot of expectations for this team. And I don't know why that is exactly. They, as I mentioned, the last time we saw Wyoming play during the COVID year, they pushed San Diego State to the brink. They lost a couple of close games to Colorado State at home, and obviously there was not a home crowd advantage last year. They swept Nevada last year. So they showed some signs with basically a freshman lineup in Maldonado that they were trending in the right direction. But I think it feels like they're a year ahead of schedule. I think a lot of Wyoming fans were hoping they would follow Colorado State's path where, you know, they have this great core with Isaiah Stevens and Roddy that have been building year after year after year. And now that they're seniors, they're ready for the NCAA tournament, it appears, and, you know, perhaps to win the Mountain West. But Wyoming is in year 2, and I'm not saying they're going to challenge Colorado State for the title this year, but they definitely seem like they're going to be in the mix in that top 4 or 5. So it's going to be a great race. San Diego State, you know, has played a hard schedule like they always do. They'll be in the mix in the Mountain West like they always are. Nevada is a bit of a disappointment. I kind of thought they would be the 3rd NCAA team behind CSU and San Diego State this year. Now they've played, you know, a challenging schedule. I think they're, you know, at 500 at this point. But there's some pleasant surprises beyond Wyoming when you look at Air Force, who is at the bottom of the league. I think they're 7-1 or 8-1. So and you have some new coaches, you know, at UNLV and New Mexico and San Jose State that have all coached in the Big Ten. So top to bottom, it's a much improved league, and I think Wyoming is probably the biggest surprise in there to date.
I totally agree. I think the entire rundown of your conference from top to bottom, the whole product is definitely a step up, a level up. Maybe we can nitpick and you know, like you mentioned, Nevada, we would expect them to be a little bit more up on their game, especially with, you know, their questionable non-conference schedule, so on and so on. You know, San Diego State is going to be an absolute thorn in everybody's side, especially playing out there. But yeah, I think top to bottom, this conference is legit, and I think your squad is legit. And I'm looking forward to not only Wednesday's game, but when conference play starts a little bit later. And I'm looking forward to staying up late to watch some of these games. I have to tell you, Ryan, we're talking to Ryan Thorburn. Please give him a follow over on Twitter at @by_Ryan Thornburg, capital R, capital T. And you can follow all of Ryan's work over at the Casper Star Tribune. You can catch that at CST Tribune on the Twitter. Ryan, thank you so much for a couple of minutes catching us up on one of the biggest showdowns this week in college basketball and one of the most surprising programs thus far inside of our sport. So, Ryan, thank you so much. We totally appreciate the time.
All right. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We'll follow you this entire season. Cheers. Cilantro. Grazie, everybody. Arigato.
I'm addicted to the appetite.